My name is Whitney. I'm 32, but you might know me by another name I won't write here. Even now, after I stopped pretending to be anything I was told to be, I keep a little anonymity like a talisman. Some things I will never sell. It started with a headline that looked like a door being slammed in my face. Whitney Hale, small town fraud exposed. The headline sat on the page like a verdict. Under it was a photograph, that rehearsed high-gloss smile I've learned to wear for cameras, and below the photo, a string of sentences that made a life sound cheap. She lied about her past to win sympathy. She lied about the death of her mother to bolster a story. We raised her. She owes us. Sophia Benton. She slept with a producer to get ahead. She's not talented. She's a product. Monica Benton. She stole songs she never wrote and claimed our house for pity. Vanessa Benton, my aunt. The words were small and lethal, the way splinters are small and can kill. I read them once. Twice. I scrolled faster, hungry for context, for the trick, for the catch. The article was full of the kind of details meant to make people lean in. Precise dates, mentions of concerts I'd played, a grainy, dramatic photo of me standing on a porch. The porch I'd scrubbed as a teenager, captioned, "The house everyone says she left without thanks." They accused me of everything that can be accused without evidence. They labeled my grief a performance, my hunger for music a calculated act. They wrote that my mother's death was exploited, that I had used family trauma for sympathy to sell records. They suggested I had been propped up by favors, cash payments, secret lessons paid by relatives, a manufactured humble origin that wasn't humble at all. Then they went meaner. Sophia was quoted at length, her sentences clipped into the kind of small betrayals I knew to be her favorite craft. She never worked a day in our household, she said. She slept in our rooms, ate our food, and then left us when she had a chance. She pretends she left because of ambition, but she ran because she didn't want to be us. The article turned her memory into a timeline of slights. Every thrift store dress, every awkward family dinner, every stupid thing a teenager might do was reinterpreted as proof of my scam. They published the exact dates of recitals where, according to Sophia, I had faked illness to draw attention. Monica's section smelled of petty cruelty framed as a righteous fury. The piece quoted her claiming I slept with a producer to get on the radio. An old rumor, of course, the kind that gathers legs the way mold does in a wet corner. They included a screenshot of a DM that was supposed to be proof of impropriety, grainy and contextless, which 100 strangers on the internet would parse into 1,000 meanings. They printed lines about my alleged vanity, about how I changed people's minds, and then dumped them when I no longer needed them. They suggested I had stolen a melody, not a song, but a phrase, and passed it off as my own. Credit where credit is due, the sidebar read, as if a byline could replace the truth. Vanessa, who had kept a pious tone for years and an eye for optics, sounded sanctimonious. We fed her, we clothed her, we gave her shelter. How can she call herself self-made? She flung that we like a net across my history and asked the public to judge me for taking 2 decades to disentangle myself from a house that, in her telling, had been my cradle and my debt. They printed an old family photograph. Me, younger, awkward, hair too long, and they captioned it, "The weeping niece who used family tragedy as a ladder." They dredged up things only the house could teach. That I had been the quiet one who swept up after birthday parties, that I had been mocked for wanting to go to music school, that I had once at 13 cried in the pantry because I'd been dared to sing the highest note in front of Sophia and Monica and gotten laughter instead of applause. Those memories, mined and laid out in black type, read like evidence of fraud. The article turned cruelty into proof. The comments were immediate and brutal. People I'd never met wrote things as if they'd known me all my life. Fake. A manufactured star. She used tragedy. Who starts a career on lies? The usual internet hunger for drama turned my grief into an appetizer. A thread of conspiracy theories spun itself through threads on message boards about bought votes, about panel rigging, about secret hours in studios that were really trysts. Every rumor found an eager mouth. The section that made my stomach drop was the insider testimony header. They'd got one of my childhood neighbors to talk on record. She'd walk to the bus stop and practice like she was in a movie. She looked at the world like it owed her something. A former trainer, named, dated, and quoted, said I had been taught the right look and the right sob for interviews. They printed alleged receipts showing hand-me-down money transfers from family accounts framed as proof that I was bankrolled. There was even a neat little box labeled Timeline of Deceit that began with 2009, Family Supports Whitney's Lessons, and ended with 2019, National Competition, Sudden Meteoric Rise. They claimed I'd lied about where I slept in my teenage years. They claimed I'd lied about who paid for my first voice coach. They claimed my initial gigs were arranged by backroom deals. They suggested my charity performances were PR, my tears staged, my humility a costume. At one point, a paragraph accused me of manufacturing crisis, implying that I had deliberately exaggerated my mother's condition when she was alive to elicit sympathy. The sentence sat like a physical blow. I remembered the night I sat with my mother's hand in mine, the machines in a muted chorus, my voice small and useless in the sterile light. I remembered the way Vanessa had hovered, problematic and practical, measuring out consolations in teaspoons. They turned a child's mourning into a marketing strategy. I read the quotes that were supposedly from me, words I had never said, twisted into an arrogance that was foreign and ugly. I always knew I'd be on stage. They never understood me. They took my private decisions and made them public sins. They reduced the complicated geometry of truth, grief, guilt, talent, tenacity into a black and white sketch. I was the hoax. They were the injured parties. The article was a machine that shredded nuance. Every line of that piece was designed to make it hurt. They attached a stock photo of a dollar sign next to a bulleted list titled, What She Owes. Education costs, loans allegedly paid by relatives, compensation for time. They included a sidebar asking readers to vote, was Whitney a fraud? Yes, no. The poll climbed into the thousands within an hour. Of course, the most poisonous part was the way they made my family's cruelty feel plausible to strangers. They quoted neighbors who claimed I'd left the family to chase fame, and a music insider who said that my 28-year-old win was engineered by producers who favored me. My face stared from the page and looked guilty like a mugshot with stage lights. I felt everything tighten in me, an old familiar constriction that had been with me since the nights of being mocked for practicing high notes. There was the sourness at the back of my throat, the quickness of breath. For a moment, I tasted the salt they'd once poured into my tea. For a moment, the attic where I'd hid to practice felt 2 inches thick again. My agent called 3 times. My manager texted. My publicist sent a draft statement with parentheses and suggested phrases, "We are saddened. We respectfully ask for privacy. We will not engage in a smear campaign." They wanted a video, a soft, contrite apology. A humble woman, head bowed, saying she was sorry if anyone felt hurt. They wanted me to script forgiveness. Forgiveness is heavy with work. Forgiveness is a performance with props, tear ducts in the right place, a voice pitched just so. I thought of giving them the show they wanted. An apology, a return to humility, another loop of being the forever grateful girl who lets hurt pass like water over skin. The thought of staging my own contrition for the cameras made my stomach twist. I closed the article. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator. In the silence, I heard the old thing, the childhood voice that said, "You must be good to be loved," echoing like a mantra. It had protected me. It had also been my jailer. Then something in me snapped not loudly, but like the last quiet click of a locked door. I thought of all the small cruelties, the salt, the laughter behind curtains, the metronome left to lag so my timing failed. I thought of being 17 and leaving with a suitcase that smelled of mothballs and the first bruises of independence. I thought of standing on stage at 28 and hearing my name declared like a prophecy, feeling the roar of people who did not know the shape of my childhood. I won't do it, I said aloud in the empty apartment. I will not perform my repentance. I knew then what my reply would be. Not screams, not TV rants, not viral meltdowns. No, my answer would not be loud. It would be legal and quiet. It would be a ledger, a set of clean transactions that would not need the messy theater of public apologies. It would be something journalists could not edit into an accusation because receipts do not beg for opinion. They had sold my story to the highest bidder, stitched their grievances into the fabric of a headline, and agreed to a price. They had turned my name into an object. I would respond not by shouting, but by rearranging the furniture of their lives. Quietly, precisely, inevitably. I pressed my fingertips to the warm piano wood until the heat from my skin bled into it. The chord I struck was not pretty. It was minor, steady, final. I would not let their noise become my noise. I would not become the person who signs an apology under the glare of cameras. Tomorrow, I would do something nobody would expect. I would make a purchase. I would file papers. I would buy insurance for the truth. For now, though, I closed the laptop and let the article sit like a stone in my chest. I let the anger settle into something colder and more useful than fury. The revenge I sought would not be a spectacle, it would be a silence that held weight. It would be inevitable. I was 15, the day the world lost its sound. Hospitals always smell the same, like bleach, metal, and the kind of hope that's been reheated too many times. My mother's bed was by the window, and the late afternoon light touched her skin like it wanted to remember her. When the monitor went flat, I didn't scream. I just sat there, tracing the curve of her hand, as if maybe my silence could convince the room to start breathing again. Vanessa was the one who came to get me. My mother's sister. My last relative on paper. She wore a navy dress and perfume that made me think of cold water. "Pack what you can," she said. And her voice was efficient, not cruel. The way a person speaks when they've already decided what's best for you. "You'll stay with us for a while. It's what your mother would have wanted." I nodded, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't understand that a while could mean forever. The house on Willow Lane looked friendly from the outside, all trimmed hedges and white shutters. But up close, it was the kind of place that watched you back. There were hydrangeas by the porch and a brass door knocker shaped like an angel's face. The angel's eyes were empty. Vanessa's daughters stood on the steps, both curious and disappointed. Sophia, the older one, was my age, 15, all shiny hair and perfect posture, the kind of girl who'd already decided who she was going to be loved by. Monica was 12 and still figuring out cruelty like it was a new language she'd just discovered she was fluent in. I remember the way Sophia looked at me that first night, the inspection in her eyes, the silent calculation of what my tragedy could mean for her. Pity, for girls like her, was a tool. Vanessa gave me the guest room upstairs. "Just until you settle," she said. The bedspread was stiff with starch, the walls pale pink. There was a framed print of an angel there, too. Everywhere in that house, angels stared and did nothing. Dinner was quiet that night, except for the sound of silverware and the polite way Vanessa corrected me when I said thanks instead of thank you. Sophia asked if I still planned to sing now that... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run back to the hospital, to the white sheets that still smelled like my mother's perfume. But Vanessa smiled thinly and said, "Singing is fine, as long as it doesn't become an obsession." In the beginning, they were careful. Vanessa liked to tell people she was raising her sister's daughter. It made her sound charitable, and charity was her favorite performance. Neighbors brought casseroles and said things like, "You're such a good person, Vanessa." And she'd tilt her head modestly as if goodness were an inconvenience she endured gracefully. When the neighbors left, she'd hand me the plates to wash. "Idle hands," she said, "make an ungrateful heart." Sophia and Monica learned fast. They mirrored their mother's tone, that cool, careful superiority that turns kindness into currency. When I practiced singing in the afternoons, Sophia would stand outside the door with her friends and giggle loudly during my high notes. Once she opened the door, mid-song, and clapped, mock enthusiastic. "Bravo," she said. "Your pain really sells." Monica watched and laughed because laughter is how younger siblings ask for approval. At school, people only saw the surface. 3 girls who looked like cousins in matching uniforms. They didn't see the way Sophia rolled her eyes when teachers praised my voice, or how she'd whisper, "She's milking the dead mom thing," just loud enough for someone to hear. It worked. The whispers spread like dust. I started avoiding choir practice because the silence afterward was worse than the sound of their laughter. When I tried to talk to Vanessa, she sighed in that gentle, weary way that made me feel like I was the problem. "You're sensitive, Whitney," she said. "Sophia didn't mean it that way. You need to learn to take a joke." But the jokes never stopped. The first real humiliation came during the school talent show. Vanessa had signed the permission slip herself, insisting it would be good exposure. Sophia was in the audience, front row with her phone out, pretending to film for support. Halfway through my song, a piece my mother used to hum while she cooked, my throat burned. I thought it was nerves at first. Then it got sharper. Metallic. Wrong. When I stepped backstage, I realized someone had switched my water bottle. It tasted like vinegar. Sophia found me crying behind the curtain and handed me a napkin like a queen offering mercy. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "Maybe you shouldn't sing about death. It's uncomfortable for people." Later that night, I found out she'd told her friends it was a melodrama gone wrong. The story spread faster than the music had. When I asked her why, she smiled. "Because it's true." Vanessa's cruelty was never loud. She didn't shout or slap. She believed in tone. Disapproval was her scalpel, and she wielded it with surgical precision. "You should be more grateful," she'd say, when I hesitated to babysit Monica. "You know how lucky you are, don't you? We took you in." That sentence, "when we took you in," was her favorite lullaby. She sang it every time she wanted me to forget that she needed me too. Someone to clean, to cook, to be the exhibit of her virtue. Her house was perfect. A stage set where I was the unwanted prop. Every morning began with rules. Make your bed, press your clothes, no noise after 10. Singing was allowed only in the attic, so it doesn't disturb anyone. The attic was cold in winter, suffocating in summer, but it became mine. I'd climb the narrow stairs, light a single lamp, and sing quietly into the walls until the house stopped existing. Sometimes I imagined my mother sitting beside me, nodding to the rhythm, saying, "Breathe from your belly, darling." Downstairs, I could hear laughter. Sophia's friends, Vanessa's phone calls, the life I didn't belong to. My songs became my rebellion, my proof that I still had something no one could take. When I turned 16, Vanessa threw a garden party for Sophia's birthday. Everyone was there, neighbors, teachers, a few local journalists. I was told to help serve because it would be nice for you to contribute. I remember standing under the string lights, carrying a tray of lemonade, when one of Sophia's friends, a boy with too much confidence, Kyrie, said, "Oh, aren't you the charity case who sings?" Laughter followed. I kept walking. When Vanessa saw my face, she smiled politely for the guests and murmured, "Don't make a scene." Later, Sophia cornered me in the kitchen. "You really should thank Mom," she said. "Without her, you'd probably be living in some shelter." I stared at her and said nothing. Silence, I learned, was the only language they didn't know how to mock. By 17, I'd gotten used to being invisible until they needed me. I got part-time work cleaning the music room at school so I could pay for my own lessons. Vanessa called it unnecessary, but didn't stop me. She liked the idea of me struggling just enough to stay humble. Sophia started dating the son of one of Vanessa's friends, a boy who played guitar badly and loved the attention it brought. She'd invite him over to jam in the living room, and every time I tried to practice upstairs, she'd turn up the volume to drown me out. One evening, she opened my bedroom door without knocking and said, "You know, you'll never make it. You don't have the look. You sing sad. Nobody wants sad girls on TV." I looked at her, her glossy hair, her practiced smirk, and said quietly, "Maybe not now." That was the first time she didn't have a comeback, and the first time I felt a pulse of something new, the small, dangerous beginning of defiance. The day I got accepted into a regional youth competition, I didn't tell anyone at first. It felt too fragile, like glass that could shatter if anyone breathed on it wrong. When Vanessa found the letter, she congratulated me in front of guests and scolded me in private. You shouldn't hide things from family, she said. It makes people think you're ungrateful. Sophia clapped her hands together. Oh my God, a real competition? Will they let you perform those funeral songs? I ignored her. That silence infuriated her more than any insult could have. At the competition, I wore a borrowed dress and shoes that pinched my toes. But when the lights hit, I forgot all of them. The house, the whispers, the vinegar in my throat. I sang the song my mother used to hum when she brushed my hair. For 3 minutes, I was free. When I came home with the trophy, Vanessa looked at it like it was a tax form. That's lovely, dear, she said, but don't let it get to your head. Sophia, smiling too widely, added, You should thank us. Without our stability, you'd never have made it. That night, I locked my door and hid the trophy under the floorboard. I didn't want them to see it shine. By 18, I knew the rules of their world. Never outshine Sophia in public. Never question Vanessa's version of kindness. Never show that you're hurt. So I perfected the art of the polite smile, the one that said, Thank you for nothing, but I'll take it anyway. I graduated school with honors. Vanessa told people it was thanks to her strict household. She even had the audacity to stand beside me at the ceremony and whisper, See what structure can do. I wanted to tell her that structure and love are not the same thing, that obedience is not gratitude, that the voice she tried to silence would one day fill rooms she'd never be invited to. But instead, I smiled for the camera. I left the morning after my 18th birthday. There was no dramatic goodbye, just a note on the kitchen table that said, Thank you for everything, and a suitcase with 2 dresses, a notebook, and a photo of my mother. Vanessa didn't try to stop me. She just stood on the porch with her coffee, the hydrangeas behind her in perfect bloom. You'll learn, she said. The world doesn't owe you anything. I looked at her and thought, You're right. That's why I'll take it myself. Sophia called after me. Don't forget who fed you. I didn't look back. The bus pulled away, and for the first time, I could breathe. Years later, when the tabloids would print their lies and the world would ask for my side of the story, I would think of that house. The polished floors, the vinegar water, the quiet cruelty disguised as care. That's where my revenge began, long before headlines and scandals. Not in anger, but in education. They taught me everything I needed to know about silence, about masks, about how to smile while your throat burns. They built me to survive them. And one day, I did more than that. I outlived them. In every room, on every stage, in every note that rose higher than their laughter ever reached, that was their mistake. They thought they were breaking me. They were only sharpening me. I was 18 when I walked out of that house and into the rain. No plan, no savings, just a voice that refused to die. The city didn't care who I was. That was the first lesson. It didn't care that I had nowhere to sleep except a borrowed couch, or that I'd spent the bus ride rehearsing how to ask strangers for auditions without sounding desperate. The city was a machine. It took what you offered and spat back whatever it thought you deserved. I found a room above a laundromat in the old part of town. The air smelled like detergent and steam. The wallpaper peeled in the soft curls near the ceiling. And the radiator hissed like an angry pet. But it was mine. My first home without permission. I got a job at a cafe near the music district, the kind that hired girls who looked tired but smiled anyway. Mornings started at 5 a.m., the espresso machine groaning like it hated everyone equally. By noon, my hair smelled of burnt milk, and my hands were stained with coffee grounds. Every tip went into a jar labeled lessons. At night, I sang at open mics, half-empty bars where the lights were too harsh, the microphone sticky, and the audience more interested in their drinks than in anyone's dream. Still, it was stage time. Every time I sang, I felt something shift, like the attic walls from my past were falling away, plank by plank. Some nights I cried walking home, not because I doubted my talent, but because I doubted the world would ever care. The streets were cold, and the noise of other people's lives made mine feel small. But every morning I got up again. You can't quit when no one's watching. That's when it matters most. By 19, I was taking night classes in music theory. I'd saved enough for a secondhand keyboard and a small recorder to practice harmonies. The teacher, a woman named Eileen, was the first person since my mother to tell me I was worth something. You have what money can't buy, she said, but you'll have to bleed for it. I bled. I waited tables by day, cleaned offices at night, and studied until dawn. I sang in bathrooms for the acoustics. I sang in stairwells, in train stations, once even in an empty parking lot because the echo felt like applause. I wrote songs on scraps of napkins and receipts, lyrics about mothers and silence and the weight of kindness used as a weapon. When I sent my first demo tape to a small label, I expected nothing. What I got instead was a form letter that began with, "Dear Ms. Hale, thank you for your submission." I pinned it to my wall like a trophy. Failure, I learned, is proof that you're trying. Then came the calls. At first, they were polite. "Whitney, sweetheart, how are you managing?" Vanessa's voice was smooth, like the calm before a storm. "Sophia says you're singing now? That's lovely. Your mother would be proud. You know, if you ever need help, we're here." Help. The words sounded like bait. Then came the shift. "I know you're doing well," she said one evening. "Sophia needs money for her classes. Just a small loan. Family helps family, right?" Family helps family. That was the hook. The guilt chord they always played. I said no the first time. She sighed, slow and disappointed. "You've changed," she said. "Fame's already gone to your head." I wasn't famous. I was just surviving. But in Vanessa's world, independence was arrogance. The calls didn't stop. Sophia wrote long messages. Apologies wrapped around requests. "You're the lucky one, Whit. Don't forget who was there for you." Monica followed with her own. "You're doing so well. We're proud of you." "But Mom's bills are piling up." They had a way of making theft sound like love. When I was 20, I met a pianist named Jonah. He played in the bar where I sang on Thursdays. He was older, 26, with kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like rhythm. We started rehearsing together, playing in small clubs that paid us in beer and applause. He taught me how to keep my eyes open on stage, to meet the crowd's gaze instead of looking at the floor. "You can't hide and be heard at the same time," he said. "Pick one." He was right. By 21, we had a local following. The kind that clapped louder for our courage than our skill. I thought maybe this was what freedom felt like. Living paycheck to paycheck, but still choosing every note. Then Jonah moved to Los Angeles. "Too small a town for big songs," he said. "Come with me." But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to owe anyone again. So I stayed. Alone, broke, stubborn, and sang louder than before. The years between 22 and 25 were a blur of almosts. Almost signed, almost noticed, almost stable. I recorded a small EP in a friend's basement. 5 songs, 1 microphone, and the hum of a refrigerator in the background. We uploaded it online. It got 50 plays in a week, then 500, then 5,000. Someone from a local radio show called it raw, haunting, and unpolished. I framed that too. For a month, I felt like maybe the tide was turning. Then the landlord raised the rent, and I had to move again. It's hard to build a life when every few months you start over from scratch. Still, I kept singing. Every failure hardened something inside me, and not into bitterness, but steel. I learned to say no to the wrong gigs, to men who promised record deals in exchange for dinner, to photographers who wanted edgy shots I'd never show my mother. I learned that talent opens doors, but character decides which ones you walk through. The letters from Vanessa turned to voicemails. "Whitney, it's rude to ignore your family. You think you're better than us now? Then, Sophia's having a hard time finding work. Can't you help her? She was always kind to you." Kind. That word made me laugh. I blocked the number for a while, but guilt is persistent. It finds new ways in. emails, messages from unknown accounts. Once a handwritten note left backstage after a show. We're so proud of you. Don't forget where you came from. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. Vanessa's loops and sharp ends, elegant as ever, poisonous as ever. I kept the letter, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of what I'd escaped. At 24, I finally got steady work, singing backup for a touring artist. It wasn't glamorous. Long bus rides, cheap motels, makeup done under fluorescent lights. But it was music, and that was enough. Every night I sang behind someone else's spotlight, learning the rhythm of professionalism, the rehearsals, the patience, the silence when you want to scream. The main artist, a pop singer named Lila, once told me during soundcheck, "You have a voice that doesn't beg. That's rare." I didn't know if it was a compliment or a warning. Maybe both. That tour lasted 8 months. When it ended, I came home to find 5 voicemails from Sophia. They all started the same way. "Hey, cuz, it's been forever." The last one ended with, "You owe us. Don't forget who took you in when no one else would." I deleted them. But that night, I dreamed of the attic again. The one where I used to sing quietly, afraid of being heard. Even in my sleep, the sound of their laughter still carried through the walls. At 25, I released another independent single, a ballad called Glass Voice. It was about my mother, though I never said it publicly. It played once on a late-night radio show, and I cried in the kitchen, listening to my own voice fade into static. It wasn't fame, but it was something. That same week, Vanessa called for the first time in 2 years. Her tone was sweet. Too sweet. "Oh, Whitney, darling, we heard your song on the radio. You've made it. You must be doing so well. We're so proud." Then the pause. I hate to ask, but Sophia's car broke down. I hung up before she finished the sentence. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next few years were quieter. I worked, saved, wrote. By 26, I could afford a small apartment, one with a real piano, not just a keyboard. The first time I touched its keys, I cried. It wasn't about the music, it was about finally owning something they couldn't take. But success is a slow burn. For every small win, there was another reminder of who I used to be. Reporters dug into my tragic backstory for flavor. One even tried to interview my family. When the article came out, Sophia had given a quote. "She's always been dramatic," it read. "She likes to make herself the hero." That line followed me like a shadow. But I didn't respond. I learned that silence, when used correctly, can humiliate better than words. At 27, I was teaching part-time, helping kids find their voices the way no one had helped me. They sang off-key, smiled shyly, and thanked me like I was saving them. I wasn't. I was saving myself, one note at a time. My savings finally allowed for proper studio time. I recorded 3 new songs, Rise, The Attic, and Forgive Me, Mother. They were stripped down, honest, imperfect. But they were mine. An indie label noticed. A small deal, nothing life-changing, but it meant my music would be out there. No more hiding behind cafes and bar stages. I told no one, not even the few friends who'd supported me from the start. Some joys are too fragile for sharing. Then one night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Vanessa. "Whitney," she said softly, "we saw the news online. Congratulations, dear. You've always been our shining star, but I can't help feeling we played a part in that. Don't you think?" Her voice was syrup over rusted metal. I deleted the message. But for hours afterward, I could still hear her tone. The subtle claim of ownership, the gentle rewriting of history. By 28, I had one last chance. A televised national competition. I almost didn't audition. I didn't trust the cameras, the crowds, the fake sympathy of producers who wanted a sob story more than a song. But I went, because my mother would have told me to. The night before the audition, I sat at the piano and looked at my hands. Calloused, scarred, stronger. 10 years of coffee stains, bruised notes, hunger, and silence, all leading here. I thought of the attic on Willow Lane, of Sophia's laughter, of Vanessa's voice saying, "Be grateful." I whispered, "I am." But not to you. Then I sang the song I'd been carrying for a decade, the one that had survived every insult, every empty call, every vinegar bottle and locked door. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was real. When I finished, the room was quiet. And for the first time since I was 15, that silence didn't feel like judgment. It felt like arrival. The night I won the national competition, it rained the way it only does when the world decides to cleanse itself. The lights on stage were too bright, the crowd too loud. I remember blinking into the glare, microphone shaking in my hand, and hearing my name echo from 100 mouths. For a second, I thought they'd made a mistake. Then the applause hit, and I felt something split inside me, the past falling away, the future bursting open. Someone handed me flowers, someone else hugged me, cameras flashed. I smiled because that's what winners do. But inside, I was still that girl in the attic, wondering if it was safe to be heard. Fame didn't arrive overnight. It came in waves, an interview here, a magazine shoot there, a fan letter from a stranger who said my songs made her believe again. I signed a contract with a small but ambitious label. The number on the check, $120,000, and looked like fiction. For the first time, I didn't have to count tips or ration tea bags. I paid off my debts, moved into a modest apartment with real windows, and bought a piano that didn't belong to anyone else. When I played its first chord, it sounded like air after rain. And then, of course, came the phone call. "Whitney, my dear, congratulations." Vanessa's voice was syrup sweet, dripping with pride she hadn't earned. "We watched every episode. You were magnificent. We're so proud of you. Your mother would be—" She paused just long enough to let the word dead hang between us unspoken. Then, "Sophia cried when you won. She said, 'That's our girl. Imagine that. Our Whitney, a star.'" Our. That word landed like a stone. I didn't answer right away, but she didn't need me to. She wasn't calling to congratulate me. She was calling to reopen an account. Over the next week, the floodgates opened. Messages from Sophia, from Monica, even from their friends. "We're so proud. Can we come visit? We always knew you'd make it." And then the shift. "Mom's been struggling with bills. Sophia needs a new car for her job interviews. We hate to ask, but you're doing so well now." Every line was sugar-laced debt collection. At first, I ignored them. Then the guilt set in. That old, trained guilt that whispers you owe them. I told myself they had taken me in. That maybe I did owe something, if only to close the book forever. So I called Vanessa. "How much would you say I cost you?" I asked. She laughed lightly, pretending confusion. "Oh, Whitney, don't be ridiculous." "No, seriously," I said. 3 years of food, clothes, electricity. What's fair?" There was a pause. "You don't have to." "I want to." She hesitated just long enough for greed to bloom. "Well, I suppose, if you really feel you must, perhaps around 40,000. I wired her $120,000 the next morning, everything I'd earned from my contract. I wrote in the memo, "For everything, paid in full, I thought that would buy peace." Peace, it turns out, has no price. Only rent. 3 months later, Sophia called crying. "Mom's in trouble with medical bills. She hates to ask, but—" "I already paid," I said quietly. "You can't put a price on family," she shot back. "You just did," I said, and hung up. But they didn't stop. Every week, another message, another crisis, another invented emergency that came wrapped in sentimentality. When I stopped answering, they moved to social media. Comments under my videos, fake accounts tagging me in posts about family abandonment. Then came the guilt interviews. Vanessa telling a local paper that I'd forgotten my roots. Sophia tweeting, "Some people think fame replaces gratitude." The sympathy they harvested online was intoxicating. I wanted to stay silent, to rise above. But silence only ever sounds like permission. 4 years passed in that rhythm. Music, applause, guilt, concerts by day, whispered threats by night. At 29, my career was solid. I was touring internationally, why singing to packed theaters and smiling through exhaustion because that's what success demanded. Behind every show, though, was a phone vibrating with their messages. We miss you. You owe us a visit. You think you're better than your family. Sometimes they sent photos of the house on Willow Lane. New paint, fresh flowers. Sophia once texted, "We fixed up your old room. You should see it." My old room. The pink walls where I'd cried myself to sleep. The ceiling where I'd stared and promised I'd never need them again. I didn't reply. Vanessa left voicemails that began with prayers and ended with insults. "You know, sweetheart," she'd say, "money isn't everything. You should remember the people who made you who you are." And then, after a pause, "Don't forget, I still have photos of you from before you made it. The world might like to see who you really are." That was her favorite kind of blackmail, the moral kind. No threats, just reminders that she could still hurt me without ever raising her voice. By 30, I'd stopped reading the messages. I changed my number, blocked them all. For a few blessed months, there was quiet. Then came the article. It was a Sunday. The air smelled of coffee and wet concrete. I was in my kitchen, barefoot, humming to myself when the phone started buzzing. Dozens of notifications, mentions. A friend's text. "Whitney, don't read it." Of course I did. The headline was a knife dressed as a question. Whitney Hale, the self-made lie? Under it, that same photo from my victory night. Me in the spotlight, smiling like a girl who still believed in grace. The article quoted Vanessa first. "We took her in when she had no one," she said. "We gave her everything. And when she made it big, she cut us off. It's heartbreaking." Then Sophia. "She paid us once, yes, but only because she wanted to buy silence. Who does that to family?" Monica added, "She likes to play the victim. She's not who people think she is." They'd sold the story to a tabloid for money. I found that out later. But in that moment, all I saw were their names printed beside mine like a curse I couldn't outgrow. The piece was full of distortions. That I'd fabricated my mother's illness, that Vanessa had funded my lessons, that my entire public persona was built on deceit. They printed supposed letters from me, old texts twisted out of context, and framed them as confessions. The tone was surgical, calm, professional, devastating. My fans were confused. Some defended me. Others doubted. You can't fight mud without getting dirty. And I was so tired of being dirty. That night, I sat in the dark, the article glowing on my laptop screen. My reflection looked ghostly in the glass. A woman with everything she'd once wanted and nowhere left to run. 4 years of silence. 4 years of restraint. 4 years of believing I could outkind cruelty. Enough. I turned off the lights and let the city hum outside. For once, the quiet didn't scare me. It steadied me. I thought of the attic, of 15-year-old me whispering songs into the dark. I thought of the vinegar in my throat, the laughter behind the door, the guilt I'd carried like a debt. Then I whispered it, softly the way a prayer becomes a spell. Enough. Enough of paying for peace. Enough of apologies. Enough of letting people rewrite my story while I stayed silent. They wanted to expose me? Fine, I'd show them what exposure really felt like. But not with screaming headlines or angry posts. No, and that would give them more than they deserved. My revenge would be silent. Legal, surgical. The kind of justice that doesn't make noise and that just erases foundations. I closed the laptop. The article's light flickered across the piano nearby. Its surface caught my reflection. Calm, deliberate. For the first time, I looked at her and thought, this is who you made me. Tomorrow I would make a call. A quiet one. To a lawyer, not a journalist. Because forgiveness had been my cage. And now, finally, I'd learned how to unlock it. There are moments when revenge is an instrument played loudly, a public confession, a televised reckoning. And there are moments when revenge is patient, the slow tightening of a screw until whatever rests on it cracks. I had been making a life of the latter. After the article, after the way they'd turned my life into a gossip column and a sidebar about ungrateful nieces and manufactured pain, the old ache flared, but it didn't consume me. It clarified me. Noise had never hurt me the way silence had. Now silence would be my tool. I did not want theatrics. I didn't want cameras or tantrums. I wanted the clean, bureaucratic kind of justice that looks like coincidence until the final balance sheet is posted and there's no roof above your head. For years, I had been learning systems the way a musician learns rhythm. Not because I wanted to master them, but because I needed to know where the breaks were. Lawyers, accountants, managers, people who worked in the light and the shadows between contracts. They are not mystical. They are meticulous. They notice debts, notices, the small shifts in ledgers that become avalanches. Those were the things I had been quietly studying while their voices threaded through my career like static. The house on Willow Lane had a history of appearances and vanishings, of cosmetic repairs and quiet mortgage calls. It looked solid from the street, but banks are taught to watch numbers the way birds watch tides. When the interest climbed and repairs accumulated, someone eventually forgot to pay the right bill, the right way. A bank notice sits in a file stack, then another, then a final one. It is not dramatic. It is apathetic. And that is what makes it dangerous. I did not need to be dramatic. I needed to be precise. I hired an attorney I trusted, someone who had no taste for gossip and a fondness for the lettered margins of contracts. I told her the truth. Everything I had been given as a child at Willow Lane had cost me in ways their ledgers could not measure. I told her about the salt in the tea and the matchbooks on the bench. I told her about the attic that had held my voice while the house tried to mute it. I asked if there was a way, clean and lawful, to change what belonged where. She listened, not with sympathy, but with the sort of clinical focus I'd come to respect. "We can buy property," she said. "We can enter auctions. We can file claims when a bank forecloses and sells." She described mechanisms that were public, open to anyone who cared to bid. She did not offer tricks. She offered paperwork, bids, and a patience with dates. That suited me just fine. We watched the papers. Not popular tabloids, the financial columns, the courthouse notices, the tiny legal ads tucked between classifieds. Banks publish foreclosures because they have to. The notices are dry and easy to miss if you don't look. One afternoon over coffee, my lawyer slid a sheet across the table. "Willow Lane is going to auction in 30 days, she said. I didn't sleep for the next week. Not because I couldn't, because I had to map the choreography. Auctions are public and procedural. Anyone can stand and bid. But the public nature is what makes them clean. There is no secrecy in the bidding room, no whispering back alleys. There is a ledger and a hammer and a signed certificate. If you buy at auction under your own name, the world knows. If you buy through legitimate agents, it knows the agents. It does not always care about the reasons that stand behind those agents' decisions. I was not interested in hiding. I was interested in avoiding the spectacle of owning what they called mine. I wanted to do this without turning into the monster they could point to on camera and say, "There she is, the vengeful star." I did not want their voices to fill the air when papers were signed. I wanted facts, receipts, the kind of proof a court respects, so we prepared. My attorney organized banking assurances, proof of funds, and the legal instruments required to bid. We engaged an auction house. They do this for a living. They handle the details. On the day of the sale, I sat in the back of a small room that smelled of old coffee and cheap cologne, watched the bank present the case, listened to numbers being called out. I watched Vanessa's house on the screen, the same porch, hydrangeas pretending nothing had happened. The bank's representative read out the outstanding balance, the claims, the liens. The room moved like a machine. When the hammer came down, the house changed hands. The paperwork listed the auction winner and the legal entity that had placed the winning bid. The process was by the book. The bank was satisfied. The ledger turned. Ownership shifted. There are people who think the legal world is a set of smoke-filled rooms where fortunes are quietly traded. There is some of that in the movies, but the truth is more banal and therefore more effective. It is the careful completion of forms, the deposit of cash, the stamp on an envelope. The house belonged to whoever had paid for it in the public record. That was its law, that was its cruelty. We did not parade the deed. My attorney filed everything correctly and, crucially, publicly. The transfer was recorded. The bank closed its files and walked away with a cleared account. The house belonged to a new owner on paper. Paper does not shout. Paper is not vindictive, it is methodical. Word spread in the small circles that observed these things. Foreclosure, auction, sale. Vanessa called my phone the next morning, voice thin with the kind of fear that sounds like contrition. "Whitney," she said, "I heard about the auction. How could this happen?" "Banks do what banks do," I said. It was a truth. I did not gloat. I did not offer poetry. I simply recited the facts. She came to the courthouse with Sophia and Monica, hands clasped like prayer. They asked a clerk how that could be. They asked lawyers and neighbors. No one could show them a person on camera who had signed the check in their name. The sale was public. The chain of title was accurate. Whoever had purchased the property had done so within the law. There was no scandal to milk, no villain to point to. They wanted a story. The newspapers wanted a face. The auditors wanted signatures. The ledger wanted a signature. In the weeks that followed, they discovered something worse than a man with my face on a front page. They discovered that ownership could change without a scream. For the first few days, they tried to understand the technicality as an outrage, a banking mistake, a clerical error. When reality edged in, anger followed. Anger that had always rested behind their perfect smiles now turned to panic. The bank, which had its notices and its policy and its deadlines, was unsentimental. It had sold a debt and taken an asset. It had no interest in the family drama. Its files were clean, its stamps complete. The house belonged now to whoever had the certificate. That was that. You would think people might appeal to the humanity of it, argue in front of a judge about generosity and moral debt and the price of shelter. They tried, in the way people do, when they want a different ending. But courts want legal standing, not theatrical pleas. The law asks for ownership records and proof of payment. It is not designed to adjudicate who was owed love. Vanessa's calls became frantic. Her voice moved through rage, pleading, threats cloaked as mourning. She accused people, collected sympathy from neighbors, tried to contact journalists. The tabloids smelled blood and circled, but without a smoking gun, their appetite cooled. I had not staged a scene to be photographed. There was only a legal continuity that read like dry ink. Sold at auction, certificate of sale executed, deed recorded. Sophia and Monica found themselves suddenly without the shelter that had suffocated them and sustained them on their terms. The house that had been the stage for their mockeries now sat in wait, fenced and scheduled for maintenance, while professionals inspected and inventoried what remained. An auction is tidy in its aftermath. Inventories, notices, locks changed. The utility companies responded to the new owner's paperwork. The bank's lien was lifted. The legal zip of the machine closed. When the keys were turned, it was not I who locked the family out in a single vindictive motion. It was the law, glacial and exacting, doing what it does in the absence of payment. The day the locksmith changed the lock, the Bentons stood on the path, faces pale in the bright sunlight. They had every neighbor watching, every neighbor whispering words that would feed the next social post. I asked my attorney to handle the handoff. There was nothing to sign on my part as an individual. The public documents were impeccable. The house would be managed, and the personal property would be dealt with in accordance with law. The new recorded owner, an entity that had paid at auction, could, if it wished, draw up offers or manage the distribution of items. It could sell them back, or donate them, or leave them to rot. Ownership is a set of choices, some kind and some not. No one could prove I had orchestrated the bid. The auction record named the buyer. The buyer's paperwork was separate. The law had turned their private cruelty into a public event that did not require a villain to be effective. The bitterness in that was not mine to manufacture. I'd only ensured a finality that their screams could not reverse. They tried what people always try when they have been stripped of certainty. They made accusations, looked for conspiracies, accused banks of rigging sales, whispered that some rich fan had bought the house to humiliate them. Journalists poked politely and mostly moved on. There was no smoking gun. There were only transfers and receipts and an inevitable ledger. And there, with all the legal boxes ticked and the hands of the clock unmoved by name or pity, they found themselves on the curb with a few suitcases and too much pride. Some neighbors offered blankets. A distant cousin put them up for a week. Social media performed its sadistic duty. The Benton staged images of heartbreak and uploaded them, begging for empathy. A few charitable hands extended help, but charity is often a loan that comes with conditions, and Vanessa's pride made charity a bitter medicine. I will not lie about what that did to me. Watching them on the pavement in front of their own door felt like a clean pain. The ache of seeing what you have to do to untether yourself from the past. I had not wanted blood, and there was no blood. I had wanted a silence that had weight, a silence that could not be smoothed over by a quote. I had wanted the architecture of consequence. They called me monstrous. They called me cruel. I let the words pass like wind over a lake. I had paid them anger with the precise currency of law. I had not broken windows. I had simply refused to feed the machinery that allowed their entitlement to his home. There were no dramatic confrontations, no cinematic shouting on a porch. There were only boxes, a lock, and a certificate on a clerk's desk that transformed property into something else. Not a stage for mockery, but an asset unmoored from the people who had used it as a stage. I thought of my mother's hands that night, small, tireless, steady, and I thought of the attic where I had learned to shape my voice into something that could not be baited. I walked past Willow Lane once, weeks later, and the hydrangeas were still blooming, tended now to be neutral, like an exhibit the public had decided to ignore. The house sat behind a fence. A small truck with a neutral logo pulled up, and professionals moved in. The house was addressed like an object, not a family. They were on the street for a while. Life is cruel and pragmatic in its own way. Creditors have papers, courts have rules, charity has limits. They lit into the injustice of fate and into me, who had the temerity to be quiet and legal about what I had taken back. I heard their interviews on late-night radio. Vanessa's voice raw, addressing an invisible camera with a composed indignation. How easy it is for people to play their pain when they have the camera in front of them. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood talked. Some called me ruthless. Others called me clever. None of it mattered. The house legally was not theirs. The keys that had been hers were in a lockbox controlled by a professional. The bills were no longer their burden, and they were, for the first time in their lives, responsible to a ledger rather than a narrative where they always came out the aggrieved party. When the first winter came, they found temporary shelter. They scrounged for work. They learned what it is to be conspicuous in a crowd without a fixed address. There is a humility that arrives when you are forced to knock. I watched at a distance as the edges of their arrogance flaked off like old paint. It was not pretty. It was not satisfying the way headlines think satisfaction looks. It was quieter, and in its way, irrevocable. I did not send them money after that. I did not gloat publicly. I paid for the legal work and the auction fees. I let the legal system do its work and the bank collect its balance. I slept well because the night was no longer a place where I was counted out of existence by a family ledger. I slept because I had used the public instruments of law to change a private structure that had once made me small. The revenge I had chosen did not return them to the street for cruelty's sake. It returned them to consequence. The difference is a moral question that will never sit cleanly on a stage. I accepted that. I had been a child taught to be small and grateful. I had chosen, at 32, to stop paying the price of their moral accounts. In the quiet after the storm, after the auction, after the locksmith, after the legal papers signed and recorded, I played my piano. The notes filled my apartment and, for the first time in years, felt unclaimed by someone else. They were mine. That, more than anything, felt like a victory. Not because I had ruined anyone, I had not, but because I had dismantled the machinery that told me I owed them my life. The house was a symbol, and symbols can be dismantled with ledgers and law. I had chosen the quiet path. It left them homeless for a while, yes, but it left me whole. When journalists finally asked pointed questions, "Did you orchestrate the purchase?" I let my lawyer speak. The public record spoke louder than rumor. The case closed. The world moved on. And in the silence that followed, I learned to sing without apology.